Welcome to our course on the Spring MVC framework. Throughout this course, we're going to teach you to use Spring MVC to develop better web applications in Java. First, I'd like to take a little bit of time just talking about the course itself. Spring MVC is the topic for our course, and it is a Java Model View Controller framework. We know that MVC, or Model View Controller, is a pattern that is often applied when building applications. In this case, Spring MVC has developed a framework that helps us structure the architecture of our web applications. The framework is built on top of Spring, which allows us to keep the different components within the web application very flexible and loosely coupled. You'll find that the framework really adheres to the separation of concerns principle and divides the different layers up of a web application. We'll discuss more about the MVC framework and the benefits of Spring MVC later in the course. For now, you just need to know that really Spring MVC will change your perspective on web application development. I remember before Spring MVC, I always felt like there was something missing when I looked at custom-built Java web applications that strictly just used JSP and servlets. There really was no consistency, there was really no architecture to these applications that I saw, and I always felt like there was this piece that should make things easier and make things a lot more clean and kind of perform that separation of concerns. The biggest criticism of early Java web applications is that everything went into the JSP, all your logic, your authentication. And once I was introduced to Spring MVC, now I think it's about the only way to build web applications. Just because the framework provides such great assistance and such great tooling and reusable support for developing web applications. The course is going to teach you a lot of things that revolve around the framework. I just highlighted three of the main principles here. One is we're going to teach you how to configure the framework. Spring MVC, like Spring, has some configurations that need to be put in place, and the different beans you use often allow you to customize different pieces of the framework and make them perform in different manners. I'll teach you those configurations, and then we'll look at the key framework components. The key framework components are things like controllers, view resolvers, views, handler interceptors. There's also request mappings, and there's data bindings, and there's a lot of components that we need to take a look at, and they all really make up the request processing lifecycle within Spring MVC. And really, that's what it's all about, taking in a request from a user and sending back a response. But Spring MVC is so great because it takes a lot of the steps that normally occur in that process and it makes them easier by delivering components that are ready for our use that are able to do things such as data binding or resolving our views. You'll see more about how the framework makes things easier as we work through the course. Let's talk about the prerequisites for this course. If you've ever developed a web application, you know it's not a simple task. There's a lot of different technologies that go into the stack of a web application. For example, if it's a Java web application, you're working with Java and you have the servlet API, so that's something you need to understand prior to coming into this course. You also know then you build out your client side, so you're going to be using HTML, JavaScript, and XML. Those web technologies then sit on top of a Spring framework, so Spring MVC. And a foundational level piece of Spring MVC is Spring Core. You should also have some familiarity with Spring Core. I'm not going to touch on some of the basic topics within Spring. I'm going to stay focused on Spring MVC and that web piece of the framework. There are plenty of resources out there, especially by O'Reilly, that can help you build your skills in these technologies and then be able to take this course and really get the most from it. Finally, I'd like to talk about our course project. So as we work through the different lessons within the course, we're going to be using a very simple project just to illustrate different demonstrations that showcase different features of the framework. When we do this, we're going to be working with a project that is built around two domain objects. One is a project and the other is a resource. So a resource would be something like a staff member, maybe a computer, or some other resource that we need to complete a project. The project is not complete by any means that we're going to use throughout this course. It's not something you would then deploy into production and start managing your projects and your resources. With the complexity that's involved in a web application, I had to sometimes really force the issue to demonstrate different principles within Spring MVC. However, the great thing about that is it's really obvious what we're trying to achieve because I have taken some liberties with the project, and that makes it very important for you to update the working files for each lesson. I can't walk you through building out the UI for every single little piece of the project. There are things that kind of fall outside of the Spring MVC scope that I need to build into the project in order to demonstrate the different principles that we're going to be covering in each lesson. Make sure you update your working files for each lesson that we cover. I'm excited for this course, and I'm ready to get started.